Hello everyone, it's History Behind the Warrior, and welcome back to yet another Tekken 8 History of episode. With us now in the post-release era of Tekken 8, and us slowly drawing into spring, it means that more DLC and more characters will be coming our way. So with that in mind, and in celebration of the recent showcase, I thought that today would be the perfect opportunity to sit you all down and get you up to date with a fan-beloved favourite, master of Capoeira, and teacher to Christie Monteiro, Eddy Gordo. Now, Eddy is a fan-beloved character in the franchise, one that's had a long legacy ever since his debut in Tekken 3. Yet even so, whilst he's never been pushed to the forefront of the narrative, he's had huge narrative ties to that of the main cast, more specifically Kazuya Mishima. But why is that so? What ties Eddy Gordo to the Mishima line? And how does it interfere with his main story? Well, that is what we will be exploring today. But before we do begin, as always, if you like what we do here and wish to see more, please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as well as subscribe and tick that bell, as it is the best way of staying up to date with everything Tekken related here. So, without any further ado, let's just jump right into things. Now, Eddy himself derives from Brazil, being born into an incredibly wealthy family, one of the richest in all of Brazil. The details of where this wealth had come from has never really been touched upon, but it is known that Eddy's father did have ties to the cartel, something known as the organization. So growing up, Eddy had very big shoes to fill, especially if he wished to inherit his family business. But sadly, at the age of 19, a terrible tragedy would strike. When Eddy arrived at home, he would find his father shot, dying at their doorstep. And it's here where it's revealed that Eddy's father wasn't just some simple crime boss, but someone actively working against the crime kingpins from the inside, looking to put them away for good and relieve Brazil of their poisonous clutches. This dream would tragically never take fruition, as he was found out and assassinated. Knowing that these events would put Eddy in their crosshairs, his father told him to take ownership of this crime, because on the outside, he was an easy target. They would hunt him down and kill him, but on the inside, in prison, he would at the very least be safe, albeit put in a very precarious position. With little to no options, Eddy would follow through on his father's last wishes, being incarcerated for a murder he never committed. So Eddy would be locked away for 8 long years. But it's not like he got up to nothing during this time. Eddy's desire for revenge filled him with rage, one that cast him down a path that sought retribution. But in his current state, he knew he couldn't quite achieve that. That is, until he met a wise elder gentleman. One day during a prison riot, he saw this man use a style of combat that was both beautiful and explosive in motion. It was Capoeira. Mesmerized by its style and fluidity, Eddy would reach out to him to become his student. So for the rest of Eddy's time in incarceration, he would train every single day with the old man, learning more about this style of combat, as well as his master. Now, it is worth noting that this elder gentleman is never actually given a name. We do know, however, that he derives from the Monteiro line, as he's the grandfather to Christie. Knowing that Eddy would be released before him, he does wish to have his legacy be passed on through him, as well as his granddaughter, requesting that Eddy teach her once he was released, something he would honor later down the line. Once he is released, immediately turns his gaze towards the organization. Believing that the Mishima Zaibatsu may be key to stopping them, he would enter the 3rd King of Iron Fist tournament, hoping that he could forge an alliance with the Zaibatsu. So, this now takes us onto the events of Tekken 3. During this time period, we don't know actually how far Eddy got in the tournament, or if he even really participated at all, as all that we know about him during this time is that either during the tournament or just after it, Eddy would be successful in tracking down one of the crime kingpins, beating him and interrogating him to learn who was responsible for taking his father's life. And it's here where he learns the truth, that the man who'd cast the order was none other than Kazuya Mishima, the former head of the Zaibatsu, and someone who was long dead. So Eddy's quest for revenge was ultimately in vain. This, however, wouldn't be the end of his story, as Eddy was able to meet his teacher's granddaughter, teaching her in the same style of capoeira, becoming quite the prodigy at her young age. Yet, leading up into the events of Tekken 4, Eddy would mysteriously disappear, with little to no explanation given to Christie. But why? Well, during this installment, Eddy isn't an actually canon participant in this tournament, as it's heavily believed and implied that upon the return of Kazuya Mishima, Eddy's lust for vengeance had immediately resurfaced, seeking to hunt him down during the 4th tournament. So as Eddy hunted Kazuya, Christie would desperately try to track him down. Unfortunately for Eddy, he would never cross paths with Kazuya during this time. Now unfortunately, during or after the events of Tekken 4, Eddy and Christie would finally be reunited with the Monteiro master. Yet this wasn't quite the man he had remembered. Between the events of Tekken 3 and 4, the master's health had dramatically declined. He was a husk of his former self, and upon being released, was immediately hospitalized, with both being told that he suffered from an incurable illness, with 6 mere months left to live. Unable to accept his fate, and well aware of the advanced medicine the Mishima Zaibatsu held, Eddy and Christie would enter the 5th King of Iron Fist tournament, hoping that somehow and some way they would find a cure to save the old man. But despite their efforts and hard-fought battles, it would all end in catastrophe, as neither of them won, and the health of the Capoeira master continued to spiral for the worst. So this would take us up to the events of Tekken 6. With little to no options left, Eddy would forge an alliance with the new Zaibatsu leader, Jin Kazama, who did sympathize with his current situation. Thus, he agreed to give his mentor the treatment he so desperately needed, but only in exchange for Eddy's services, having him join his Tekken force and be one of his generals. And whilst on the surface, this didn't seem like something too bad, in actuality, this was a terrible decision, because by joining Jin's side, he had also followed him in his global crusade of annihilation, watching horrible acts be carried out in his name. Yet knowing how bad his master needed this treatment, he would remain by his side, seeking to eliminate any that were a threat to him. It's also around this time where he presumably cut off contact with Christie in order to keep her safe and away from him. So the two during this time have a very estranged relationship. It's only up until he is defeated by Lars Alexanderson where his ties to Jin are then severed. By the end of the events of Tekken 6, Eddy is reunited with Christie, but this is all done sadly during their master's funeral, as their master had finally succumbed to his illness. Although the two are reconciled, a rift has notably opened up in their relationship, as he wasn't there by his side when he had passed, something that breaks Christie's heart. So following this, Eddy would return back to Brazil, opening up an orphanage. It's actually during this time period where he would become a master himself, teaching these children the same style of capoeira he had. Although he was very content with this lifestyle, that burning hatred still very much so simmered beneath the surface for Kazuya Mishima. So during the events of Tekken 7, with the return of Heihachi Mishima and his announcement of the 7th King of Iron Fist, Eddy would enter in hot pursuit of Kazuya Mishima, even infiltrating G Corporation to exact his revenge. But when he arrives, he's confronted by a figure he never expected to see. The K-pop star and propaganda machine of G Corporation, Lucky Chloe. Now, there are actually two outcomes to this fight, with the true outcome of this battle still being unknown. If Eddy wins and defeats Chloe, as he attempts to interrogate her, she hands him a note that distracts him long enough for her to get away, leaving Eddy with no answers and if anything, just more frustration and anger. And in Chloe's ending, where she would defeat Eddy, he's then recruited to become her backup dancer, whom she does beat into shape, breaking both him and Kenny's heart. So coming into Tekken 8, we actually don't know what's become of this character since then, especially with him being part of the first wave of DLC. But with character stories being a thing, it has been confirmed that we will learn what became of Eddy during the course of Tekken 8. But with that said, and everything noted, this has been it for the history of Eddy Gordo. And I do hope you have enjoyed this one and learnt more by doing so. Eddy Gordo is a very popular character in the franchise, as he was just one of those characters you could kind of mash and see some very cool stuff happen. But beneath that button mashing surface is a character that's quite deep, with ties to that of the Mishimas for all of the wrong reasons. So with the death of his master, I'm very intrigued to see what comes next for his character, even if it isn't entirely interwoven to that of the main canon. So, with that said everyone, that has been it for me. Now, as always, stay strong, stay well, and keep on fighting. I'll catch you all in the next one.